Did I ever tell you about the night that the mannequin came to life and haunted all the costumes?
What happened?
I just told you, darling. A mannequin came to life, haunted all the costumes.
I've heard better. Hey, every pony, welcome back to Pony Talk. And boy, that sure is one clickbaity title, isn't it? Now, I'm sure with that title, you're expecting me to talk about the villains or some of the surprisingly horrifying moments the creators have worked into the show. I can definitely think of a couple off the top of my head. But instead, I'm talking about something in a more broader sense. Something that relates MLP to one of my favorite movie genres, horror. Now, at first, that might seem like a bit of a stretch, but again, it's not like the show staff hasn't worked some things in, like, this. Yeah, that's a thing. I still can't believe it is, but it is. And they have brought us some rather intense moments here and there. So yeah, the show is no stranger to horror elements, but I want to talk about horror in general and how it kind of reflects the times and its fans, and how they can actually kind of apply to MLP and bronies. Now, this idea first came to me back in October when I was watching a documentary on Netflix called Nightmares in Red, White, and Blue, which shows you how on the ball I am with my stuff. Now, this documentary talked about all the changes horror movies went through throughout the decades to kind of reflect the culture at the time. It's actually really fascinating, I highly recommend it. And it did make me think about how other forms of entertainment also kind of changed with the times to reflect what's going on in the culture at the moment. Of course, one of the first things I went to was My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic. Because whether you like the show or not, let's be honest, it has made a pretty significant cultural impact by this point. Again, like them or hate them, most people kind of know what the word brony means by now. Now, while I do love the show, I have often wondered at times, why did it get this big? And I honestly think a lot of it has to do with the time it came out. Now, in the documentary, they said that horror movies actually got darker as the world around us got bleaker and bleaker. And yeah, about 2009, 2010, things were kind of bad. So it's not surprising that horror movies would take advantage of that feeling. But they were also starting to get good. Things actually were starting to turn around. While there was still a lot of work to do, there was a sense of hope. A feeling that maybe things are going to get better, maybe soon. And we as a society needed something to reflect that. Then here comes this show about brightly colored ponies talking about the magic of friendship, who live in a world that is, for the most part, peaceful, and certainly bright, and just has a general air of optimism about it. I mean, the major thing they use to keep them safe are called the elements of harmony. Come on now. But of course, it was a reboot of a franchise that has not done so well in the past. Or at the very least did not have a really good public perception. For reasons I'm still trying to figure out myself, My Little Pony has always been one of the girliest things ever. At least that's how the outside world looks at it. And let's be honest, we all had that moment when we started getting to the show too. But we got into it not only because it was well written, but also because of just how unapologetically nice and fun it was. I really believe this was the show we needed at that time. We need something to tell us that it's okay to be optimistic, to be nice to each other, to have fun. To let us all know that, hey, things are gonna work out fine. So while Lauren Faust and the staff drew us to the show, I think it was our need for something like this that made us stay. I mean, be honest, wasn't it nice to see a show that was completely devoid of the cynicism and bitterness that had been encroaching in other forms of entertainment and TV shows? I know it was a big draw for me, and one of the things I love about the show to this day. And I'm not alone in thinking this. In some of the Brony documentaries I finally got around to watching, there are some psychologists saying the exact same thing. So yay for me for figuring something out! Speaking of other documentaries, there are a few more horror ones I watched, whose names I can't remember right now, that went more into horror fans themselves. And listening to a lot of them talk about why they got into horror, because they were the outsider, they were the loner, they were kind of the weirdo, they didn't feel they fit in anywhere, and other kids kind of made fun of them, it made me think of another group like that. Bronies. Yeah, there were a lot of parallels between how horror fans and bronies were perceived by the public at large. Both are seen as groups that are kinda not right, and everyone gets a little leery around them. But they not only found friends in their form of entertainment, but a way to deal with the world around them. Now, I'm not gonna say horror fans are the kind who are gonna go out and hurt people because they watch horror movies, that's just dumb. But speaking as someone who was shunned a lot by my peers, there is a catharsis in watching them. Especially in the slasher movies where people like those who would pick on me kinda got what was coming to them. So it was almost therapeutic in a way. Now, My Little Pony is the opposite end of that spectrum. That outlet is still there, but in a much more hopeful tone. It lets you know that really holding on to those feelings is not going to do you any good, and it's only going to hurt yourself in the long run. You need to let that bitterness go and embrace the people around you who do care and love you. Honestly, that could be why we see so many villain redemptions throughout the series. I mean, what better way to pass that message than to actually show our heroines forgiving those who have wronged them? And show that even sometimes the most despicable people can change. Again, that's that hope and optimism showing through. And while that does seem like it'd be the complete opposite of MLP at first, really sit down and think about it. Aren't most horror movies about trying to find hope in a hopeless situation and getting the strength to get through adversity? And isn't that what the cast of MLP has done time and time again? Sometimes in pretty dire situations themselves. So when you go below the surface, the two might have more in common than we initially thought. Especially with their fans and how they're received by the general public. But I'll go into that more next time when I try to figure out why bronies are still hated. For now, I hope you'll leave some comments below and let me know your thoughts on this whole thing. And don't forget, there's still time to ask questions for my Q&A special coming up soon. Shameless plug. Well, until next time, I am Birdie, and I'll see you again for more Pony Talk. Chill.